Meg G here for Sportlight, and I have to say we are so very lucky to have with us today one of college lacrosse's legendary coaches, Coach Bill Tierney. Coach, you have so many accomplishments. If I tried to run through them all, we'd be here all day. So I'm going to try and hit some of the highlights. You've been coaching for over 36 years, 7 national championships, combined 27 regular season and conference tournament championships, only the second coach to achieve over 400 wins as a coach. One of my absolute favorites, however, is when you took over the Johns Hopkins soccer team in 1986, and you took them to the NCAA tournament with no soccer background. Coach Tierney, it is such an honor to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Megan. Brian, thanks for having me on. I always love doing these things, especially, when there's that attachment to DU at heart. And, it's nice to talk about your past and everything, and hopefully talk about some successes in the future as well.
Well, the first thing you've got to talk about is this soccer. That's an amazing thing to be able to take them to the NCAA tournament. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So what happened was I was a football coach. In fact, I had, kind of reached my lifetime goal of being the head football coach at my high school. And then my best friend, who was the lacrosse coach up at RIT in Rochester, New York, left there late in August to go to Ithaca College. And so somehow, some way, they talked the athletic director into hiring me. And so my wife and I went up to Rochester, New York in January of 1982 and lasted, 2.5, 3 years there. But then the Johns Hopkins assistant job opened in the spring of '84. And interestingly enough, the goalie who had played for me in high school, Larry Quinn, was now at Hopkins. And somehow he talked the coach into talking to me. Well, they had a great old AD there named Bob Scott, and Bob was a wonderful man. And he said to me, well, I'm in a dilemma here. I have to hire somebody to be our head soccer coach. So I kind of told a little white lie. I said I had a little soccer background. I did score the winning goal in our 6th grade championship in Levittown Elementary Schools. And I did share my office with the soccer coach at RIT. So I thought that was enough. And so Bob said, all right, the good news was, and I've made my career on taking over programs that had hit in some hard times. And this one I thought was the easiest. They had only had one winning year in 50 years of soccer at Johns Hopkins. So I figured, how can I do any worse? And so Bob hired me. And, my first year, we were like 7-9, and then we went 14-3, and then 14-3 again. And then that third year we won our conference, won the state championship, and then were invited to the NCAA tournament. So, and in fact, that was the thing that the people at Princeton subsequently to that say that helped me get the Princeton job after that, was more because they hoped I knew a little bit more about lacrosse than I did about soccer. And if I could do that in soccer, hopefully we could revive the Princeton lacrosse program.
You've got your coaching background and you've got a phys ed background, but where do you start coaching something that you hadn't coached really before?
It's a great question, Brian. I got to tell you, it's probably my most honest moment in my life was that first meeting with the soccer team at Johns Hopkins, where I literally had to say to those kids, I know nothing about soccer. And so you're going to have to deal with me. They were a bunch of pre-med and engineering guys. Hopkins has a unique situation. They're Division I in lacrosse, but they're Division III in every other sport. So these were kids that were there for their education and happened to be some pretty good soccer players there. I said, so, you're going to have to help me through the coaching part and the skill part of soccer. There's 2 things I'll do well. I'll recruit, and I'll give great halftime speeches and motivate you and get you in shape. So I guess it was 3 things. So we did that pretty well, and the kids bought in. They kind of actually, if you threw that, a lot of years later, from some, 40 years later, all kids now think that they should be, tell the coach what to do. And so it was really, it really helped me in my coaching career to really be humbled by 18 to 22-year-olds, and yet I think it helped them to know that someone was there that trusted them to help him along as well. So it was a great symbiotic relationship, and they were a great group of kids. And as I said, it was a really, really humbling yet satisfying and enjoyable experience.
Yeah, because I'm connecting, right, because you coached high school football before that as well, and usually football coaches are very, aggressive, almost authoritarian. They're constantly telling people where to go, how to line up, how to move, and every little inch and step matters. And then you go out to soccer practice though, and
Well, I was that exact football coach. So,
yeah,
I was that guy. I loved coaching offensive football, calling the plays. And, in football, there's probably on game day, it's probably the sport that has the most impact from coaches on game day, because you're calling every play usually about an average of every 10 or 15 seconds. And so all of a sudden you get to soccer, or you get to lacrosse, or you get to, even basketball, where your coaching is done during the week. Yeah, you call timeouts and you make some key decisions when the kids are on the sideline, but it's pretty free flowing, and you hope that you've prepared them well enough to make those decisions on the field. Whereas in football, it's my decision after my decision after my decision. So that part was tough. And I remember the first game, the referee telling me to sit down. I didn't know that soccer coaches sat down. I thought they ran up and down the sideline like lacrosse coaches, So it was a very interesting experience. But again, I think that football mentality took me a while to get out of.
Yeah. Did that inform your coaching in both scenarios, right? Did you learn some things and then adapt it to football, or vice versa,
No question, no question. And I thought that even to the soccer, in the practice parts, we had some standard, rules, I guess you'd call them, that I used from lacrosse and football that carried forth. They were different. Like just an example, in lacrosse, we tell the guys one of the advantages is, in lacrosse, there's 15 yards behind the goal line and the end line. And so you've got a lot of room to work back there. In soccer, you don't have that. The goal line is the end line. But just for instance, in lacrosse, I know we always tell the guys, when in doubt, get the ball behind the goal, because now the defense has to turn and look behind the goal, and lots of things can happen behind them that can be good scoring opportunities. So what we did was kind of instituted in soccer there, that before you cross the ball, you had to get within 5 yards of the end line, because that kind of created a similar scenario, things like that.
Can you speak just briefly about how you got started at the university, as well as then how you developed yourself and how you prioritize your education until today?
Well, that's an impactful question for my life anyway, because when I grew up, coaches had so much impact on me as a young person. From the time I was 8, 10 years old, in every sport I played, my older siblings were athletes, and I couldn't get enough. I grew up in a place where there was 42 kids on a block that had 20 houses. It was post World War II, baby boomers. So you were playing everything, but the impact, I noticed at a young age, the impact came from my coaches. And so I always wanted to be a coach. And back then, the way you were a coach was you had to be a teacher. And the way I knew I wasn't going to be a history teacher or a math teacher. So I became a phys ed teacher, because two guys, my two favorite high school coaches, most impactful guys in my high school career, were my phys ed teachers and high school coaches. So with that leading in to, as you mentioned, Brian, my physical education background at Cortland State, you learn so much. People, when people sometimes smirk when you say you're a phys ed major, and I think people who have been through it understand that it's not just the learning how to play badminton and go bowling. It's physiology of exercise. It's kinesiology. It's anatomy and physiology. It's movement based. It's understanding. And in my era, it was just about the time where people were starting to accept weightlifting. When I was in high school, they told you don't lift weights; it hurts you, And so the teaching classes, oftentimes I speak at group things, from what I learned from teaching, just simple things like when a person in the first row asks a question, don't just answer that question to that person, repeat the question so that the people in the back rows, it might be, I've spoken to 2,000 people at a time one time, and so they better understand what the question is, or it's, you might as well be speaking a foreign language. So learning all those things, eye contact, getting to know people's names as best as you can, the accordion type teaching methods of bringing the group together. Now go do it. Bring them together. Now go do it. Because, and we've changed even since then. All I learned back then, people now all say, well, kids have changed. Well, I think our teaching has had to change, and we use here in our lacrosse program a 4-step teaching method, which is number one, we do what we always used to do, is draw it on a board. Right now it's a whiteboard, and it used to be a blackboard, but that's number one. And then number two, we show it on film. And then number three, we do it in what we call skeleton. So if it's an offensive thing, no defense. If it's a defensive thing, we put cones out and no offense. And then finally live action, and we film again. And so I think learning the fact of how to teach, how to learn skills that you clearly didn't have when you came. I mean, you had to take so many skill courses, and then learning those really intricate things about physiology and stuff like that. It was a challenge. It was a challenge, and I remember my junior year was probably, I was in the best shape of my life, and unfortunately, I wasn't doing real well in physiology of exercise. So I went to the professor and I said, Professor Tomek, I'll never forget his name. What can I do to help me get through this class? He said, I'll make you a deal. Next lab, come in your gym clothes. So I said, okay. And those were the days where we had treadmill, but they had when they were measuring O2 and CO2 intake and output, they didn't have the machinery we have now. So you had this big plastic bubble thing. They put this mouthpiece in you. You could hardly breathe anyway. And he put me on a treadmill and he said, if you can make it to 17 minutes, I'll give you a C. So so I said, and all my buddies are in the class, circled around. They know I'm going to die here, right? So I start running, and I'm in great shape. And I don't know if he didn't notice that, or maybe he was just giving me a break. But I get to about 17 minutes, and I'm still doing well. So back then you had to crank the things up so that the tilt in the treadmill went up, and you could turn the speed up a little bit. So all of a sudden now it's 19 minutes and I'm going uphill. Now it's 20 minutes and I'm really going uphill. Finally, I'll never forget this. At 22 minutes, he shuts the thing off and he goes, damn it, you're getting a B in the course. And that was it. That's how I earned my B in physiology of exercise.
How do you keep kind of updated and on top of all the different new research that's been going on and in the process?
Yeah, I think the key, Meg, is to number one, know that you're getting older and the kids are getting younger seemingly, and you gotta every generation has hated the music of the generation before that, and every generation have used the term, oh, kids these days. And we all know that. We heard that from our dads, from our grandfathers, and now they're hearing it from us. But I think one of the things that really helped me was just my first 14 years at Princeton. I had 14 different second assistants. Now, my one assistant stayed with me all through my time there, and thank God for him, David Metzbauer, who's now down at North Carolina. But we had 14 different young people that came in to see if they really wanted to be coaches or not. And it was fun going through those years of listening to their input. But I think mostly is that respect and understanding that there's not only one way to skin the cat. And as you get older and more experienced in coaching, you start to realize that your hard and true ways aren't going to be hard and true every year. The quality of coaching in our sport, and I know all sports, has gone up drastically. Young people used to come into coaching because they didn't have anything else to do. Now they're coming in because it's a great career. They know they can make a a whole lifetime out of it. But that means studying film, listening to the older guys and working on their thing. I saw a quote a couple of years ago. We were talking about how I'm a defensive coach, how I always like to win 9 games 9-7, and now we'd like to win them 15-13. And some, of course, social media now you're in a spotlight all the time. And I remember one guy writing, "See, even Tierney can't coach his own defense anymore." So what you got to learn is just to be flexible, to go with the growth and the culture of the young people, and to make sure that you listen to your assistant coaches, because they really are impactful in how they deal with young men.
Do you find that you've learned different tricks and different ways in which you can connect with each generation, or does it change that much over the years?
Well, I think, and we're hearing this more and more finally, is that it's not the kids who have changed, it's the parents. And so, we are dealing with a generation that has not, even if they've lost every game that they've ever played in, they've never experienced failure, because right at the end of that game, it was the coach's fault, the referee's fault, the weather's fault, the field's fault, the ball wasn't blown up enough, whatever it might be. And so that going through failure, I think, is one of the greatest things about sports. I don't like to lose, but you get better from failure, even if it's just not being able to do a skill well. So I think that part has changed a little bit, but adjusting to them. What we've also learned is that young people, even though they want to hear why a lot, and that's helped us in our coaching, we don't even let them ask why, because we tell them why before we start teaching them the skill. This is, we're going through some stuff now in the fall here at Denver, where we're working in small cohorts because of the pandemic, and we're explaining to them that we're working in these partial groups. 3-on-3, 2-on-2. Lacrosse is played in a half. Once you get to one end of the field, it's a 6-on-6 game. And so learning those small parts and putting it together, I've normally been the teaching methods of going back to phys ed is whole to part or part to whole. I've always kind of been a whole to part, back to whole again method of showing them the big picture, showing them the little skills, and then reviving the big picture again. And I've changed that now. I'm now forced by the pandemic and forced by the learning skills of young people now. We are definitely part to whole, and maybe have to go back to part again a bunch of times, but back to whole again. And I think it's kind of been effective.
Having the coaches yell at you and say something, they're like, "Hey, this is not, I'm trying to learn," but obviously we're stuck in this mindset where it's not effective.
So I think just letting them know nowadays that you love them. We use the word love around here a lot. We hug them, we kick them. When the last thing I say to any young man's parents before he commits to come into Denver and we commit a spot to him is, I need the permission from your parents to do two things. Number one is kick you in the butt when you need it. And number two is give you a hug when you need it. And every kid needs both. And you need to just make eye contact each day, or if you miss one or two, every day, because we have a big team, just make sure you pat them on the back. Those little touches mean so much to them, and just tell them that it's okay once in a while that they made a mistake. And I had a kid the other day, a really good player for us. He was just playing terribly the other day, and he was getting angry with himself. And I said to him, I said, "Listen, there's nothing you can do about those two things. You were really bad doing those two things. But if you pound your stick on the ground and you get all upset, you'll never do a good one." I said, "Try to think about succeeding in the next one." And I've never, I don't do that a lot, but, and luckily for me, the other kids heard it, and he took a shot and nailed it, put it right in the top corner of the net. He kind of looks at me and, I kind of give him the old saying, goes, "Yeah, see, the old guy still knows a few things, and so they kind of, whenever you can get a little bit of a smile out of these guys, you've meant something to them that day. So I try all those little things and keep adaptive and flexible is how we go about our business. I think that's what's allowed me to kind of stay somewhat successful in the game.
I always found it funny when my coaches would say, well, you got to pay attention. It's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Helpful.
Yeah.
If only I thought of that.
It's great stuff. Us coaches, we have some beautiful things that we say, you know, and the difference now is the kids will kind of look at you and chuckle at you, you know, and it's the way it goes. You know, my hope is that you know, I had you know, a course, a stunts and tumbling course in college, and there was a 72-year-old professor, Prof. Holloway, and that was during the Vietnam time. And I see the Vietnam time as kids were very similar to they are now. They were a little more angry back then because they were worried about getting drafted and going to Vietnam, but they were also very inquisitive like they are now. And you had to pass this course, you had to do a standing back flip and a running front flip. And one of the guys, you know, is a real wise guy, goes, "Hey, Prof, what do we, you know, what does it matter if we can do it as long as we, you know, the kids do it in the class?" And he goes, "I'll show you, young man." And he takes off his whistle, takes off his hat, hands him to me. I happen to be standing next to him. He backs up and takes a run, and 72 years old, does a running front flip, lands square on his feet. And he goes, "So you can be a good teacher." You know, and it was just so impactful, you know, like, all right, this is what we're in for. This isn't just jumping jacks, you know, and it was pretty cool. It was a great moment.
An athlete that you really wanted to reach, but just were not able to do it, and wish you had figured it out.
Sure, you know, there are, you know, failures in our profession. Our profession is one where people look at scoreboard, unfortunately, and there are plenty of coaches that are great coaches who have been fired because the scoreboard hasn't worked for them. You know, they've lost a lot of games, but maybe nobody knew about the success stories they had with individual young men, getting them from maybe a rough home life, or maybe helped them with their studies, or whatever it might be, or, you know, all the different trials and tribulations you go with 18 to 22-year-olds. What supersedes those ones you've lost are those ones that you've been successful with that have been the risks. You know, we had a young man here at Denver, Jeremy Noble, who was, my first year here, I had to go over to Tom Willoughby, who was the admissions director back then, and begged Tom to let Jeremy in. And he said, "Bill, I just don't know. It's not that I don't like the kid. He's a good kid, but I don't know if he'll make it here." I said, "Tom, we'll take care of him. I promise you we'll take care of him." And we did. And then all of a sudden it clicked for Jeremy, and graduated with a 3.3, one of our best players ever, one of our best captains and leaders ever. And those kind of stories make you don't forget the failures, but at least make you say to yourself, "See, we can still do this, you know, on that side as well." And you take great pride in that. And the ones that have those rough home lives, you know, we've had so many crazy situations, not just here at Denver, but in all my coaching career, from, you know, divorces and deaths and families and all that stuff. And when you sit down with them and they understand that you can take that coach's hat off, you know, that football coach who told you what to do every play, that you can be, you can have, that you do have feelings, and you're with them and you call them up. I just had a young man I called 15 minutes before we got on, because he's had to go see a doctor for something pretty serious, and, you know, he couldn't thank me enough for the phone call, you know. And that, to me, that's what you should do, but to him and his family, that was just above and beyond. And you have to do that stuff.
What do you think's been the differentiating factor for you over so many years in maintaining that level of success? You know, what is it then about the pillars and you're bringing it together that you're doing a little bit better than other people, quite frankly?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm doing better than other people. I've just been very lucky with the people I've picked for my staff, and have great players, work at great institutions. But I do think that you gotta be mindful of, you know, what you're going through personally, so that you understand. It's just like the the favorite son of a dad who passes away has to give the eulogy. Somebody's got to do it. And so, I learned something a long time actually from a priest friend of mine at Princeton, and not a religious thing, but I remember saying to him, God, Tom, sometimes I feel like I've got to teach lessons to people, and I'm certainly no perfect human being here. And he said, just remember that, you're going to deal with somebody greater than you, whether it be your boss or, when we all pass away, somebody really greater than us. But right now they're looking to you, and you are their only source. So that after a game, you might be distraught about a decision you made. You might have played the wrong goalie. Whatever might have happened. You might have made a bad technical choice. You're going to feel bad for yourself, about yourself, but you got 50, 18 to 22-year-olds looking to you for guidance. And so I've always gone by the mantra of coaches lose games, players win them. And what I mean by that is quickly, they work so hard during the week. Take the burden from them. They already feel bad enough about the loss. Take the burden from them. They'll get over it. They'll be fine. By Monday, they'll come back and they'll be fine. But accept the burden for yourself, because you're an adult and you gotta handle this stuff. And so I think that just having those kinds of things, being aware, making those people around you just as important as you, and patting them on the back and thanking them every once in a while, and just doing the little things that make them know that they are important to you and your program. Because as I always say, look, we're going to get the accolade. I'm going to be the guy on that dais. My trainer is not, and so, but she may have helped our best player get through a hamstring pull just before the semifinals or the finals. So I think it's being clear to the fact that we're a village, and somebody elected me mayor of the village, but we're all in this together.
If you could go back in time to when you first started coaching and share a little wisdom with yourself that you've learned over the years, what do you think that might be?
If you haven't learned any lessons along the way about how to handle losing, how to handle injuries to key players, how to be a good or bad head coach in treating your assistant coaches, because you have all those things, how to juggle family, all those things that you go through that are part of that. If anybody thinks that coaching is just Saturday afternoons, they're crazy. I mean, back in 2001 or two, I was honored to be inducted into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame, and the topic, I had this saying always was, judge your success by what you had to give up in order to get it. And I changed my speech to judge your success by what others had to give up in order for you to get it. And when I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about my wife and my mom and my dad and my family and all those other coaches and these players who put up with me, you start to get pretty humbled that this thing is huge. And I always laugh. Now, a lot of coaches use the word family, right? You see it on the back of jerseys or T-shirts. And what it is, what I think that they're using that for is it's almost like they've never been in a family. They're talking about Christmas. They're talking about New Year's. They're talking about birthdays, all the great things that happen in life. Yeah, well, what happened when grandma died? Or what happened when, you had to fight for the last piece of hamburger on the plate because you had 10 kids in your family? Or, those down times where you were in a living room listening to maybe mom and dad have an argument or whatever, or you might have been punished, and if you don't, to me, that's why, when we use the word family, we explain it about there's love and there's love. And when you love a teammate and you're out on that field or that court with him or with he or she, you're trying to beat the living daylights out of them because you're going to make them better. And that's the love that you're projecting. Now, when you go in the locker room or you go back to the dorm or you go back to your house, now it's hey, helping somebody with dinner or cleaning up the dishes or putting your arm around a teammate that had a rough day. So love is a lot of different things, and we try to portray that as best we can.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Brian, and I really enjoy it. So anytime.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to let us know what you think in the comments, and join in the conversation around this topic and more in the forum.